This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good here on Public House Media. I just want to thank you for listening to the following broadcast brought to you by Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope that you'll come check out my show, How to Write Good, the writing show that is not about writing. A new show of How to Write Good comes up every Wednesday, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of How to Write Good. Again, thanks for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Brice, we got a busy day today. We're going to try to cover a lot of topics. We're going to talk about U.S. men's national team, U17 World Cup, Women's World Cup, Liga MX, and MLS playoffs.
That's a lot, so we better get started. Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast. As podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world, being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files, then uploaded to the host computer, allowing some really good audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. Yvonne, let's start off with allowing me to take off my tinfoil hat and come out of my bunker a little bit, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist as I once was. Because on December 2nd, Gregg Berhalter officially became the manager of the United States national team. The conspiracy theories are over. Yes, he is who we thought he is. He is the next head coach of the United States men's national team. What is your response to Berhalter being named to this role?
I mean, it is as lukewarm gets, I think, to be honest with you. And I think the biggest thing is they waited a year and a half to get Gregg Berhalter when they could have gotten Gregg Berhalter a year ago. I think that's the most frustrating thing if you're a U.S. men's national team fan, is that they waited all this time and went through this long process, or maybe they didn't go through a long process, and they ended up with Gregg Berhalter. I guess that's my biggest takeaway. Like, those are my initial reactions to it.
You know, he's not a bad coach. I mean, I'm not upset with the hire per se, but that process is just so bad. I mean, it was like, I think 480 some odd days that it took to hire this guy. The reports of not interviewing a bunch of people, some of the people that were hired in Martinez and Osorio at other national teams that were done during this time, and it is just sad that this is what it came down to. I think that was one of the reasons why we kind of talk conspiracy theory about this, is that taking him away from Columbus with all the stuff that was going on in the MLS, with that franchise potentially moving over to a different location and being relocated into Austin, and how that's kind of gone in and out and in and out. It is kind of frustrating to see in that regard, because now we're just kind of left with, how does this impact everybody else? Because you've gotten this kind of almost sidetracked story about whether or not Gregg Berhalter was delayed on being named your national team coach to protect one team in your professional league. And that is a huge aspect for me, because now I don't know what I'm supposed to be more valuing in the United States soccer system, my men's national team or the MLS. And that is frustrating to me, because now I feel like there's more questions than answers that we'll never, ever get. and we're still left with just Gregg Berhalter.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem was the process. Gregg Berhalter himself being hired isn't a bad thing. I think the thing that frustrates people is Tata Martinez just is going to coach in the MLS finals, and they didn't give him an interview because English isn't his first language. He's probably going to go to Mexico, and that looks like a better hire than Gregg Berhalter. You had Osorio, who pulled off one of the biggest upsets in the World Cup, and he went to Paraguay, and he went to Paraguay, a fine, respectable international country, but probably also a better coach than Gregg Berhalter. I think those are the frustrating things, and I think that's kind of why this feels very at the end of it, was this long process, and this is all we got.
Yeah, I know that we've talked about this multiple times over, that all these people that we wanted to be brought in, like maybe some off-the-wall picks, but ultimately none of them got interviewed. People that were saying flat out that, hey, I didn't get an interview. The U.S. Soccer Federation did not interview me for this job. I think the only person that I heard that got an interview, I can't remember if it was Vermes or the guy from FC Dallas, but there were some guys that were on the board that you thought would at least be interviewed to justify the process. And the process cannot be justified because they did not get interviewed. And that overlap puts a lot of questions into play about what are the values in the U.S. Soccer Federation that I think will not be answered, or is not going to be an answer that we like. And that to me is kind of the big issue, is that this opened the door for one of the biggest questions ever into the U.S. Soccer Federation, and they have failed every moment up to this point to show me that the U.S. Soccer Federation cares enough about actually promoting U.S. soccer into a better situation than make the World Cup most of the years, do a respectful job when you get there, losing the first round of the knockouts. It's just, they're kind of like Mexico. They're kind of like Switzerland, I guess, in that top 20 team in the world. But do you ever want to get better? Is that your goal? It doesn't seem like that's the goal for the U.S. Soccer Federation.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the crappy part about this, is that it just feels like there was no creativity in the hiring process. There was no ambition, I guess. That's kind of the takeaway, that it feels there's no ambition in the process. So, I mean, I hope he does well, but now there's going to be a lot of pressure for him. Now the problem is there's going to be pressure on him too now, because the process took so long. It was such a wonky process that he has to deliver to justify the fact that it was so ridiculous that they waited a year and they got. So, I mean, yeah, I'm just left kind of like, because the rumors were going on that it was probably going to be him for a while, and they were just waiting for the Columbus Crew to kind of just wait for the third season to end, and it just feels so lukewarm. I guess that's the most frustrating thing about it. It was just, I don't hate it, I don't love it. It's just so lukewarm.
Yeah. Well, let's try to end this on a positive note, because Gregg Berhalter is not a bad hire. We're upset with the hiring process, and those are two different things, because you can't blame the person in this case for the situations around him. I kind of thought, in my mind, it's kind of like not blaming Jimmy Johnson as the driver, despite his crew chief, Chad Knaus, illegally modifying his car without his knowledge so many times. You can't blame the player or the person, because the process is garbage. So let's talk about Berhalter, the manager, real quickly. Went in, he played for numerous teams, ended up getting an assistant job with the Los Angeles Galaxy before being named the head coach of Hammarby IF, which is a Swedish club. In 2011, he was fired in July of 2013 for a lack of attacking play was what was going on. They were in 8th place at the time that he was sacked. He then went on to get a job with Columbus Crew, and that's where he's been most of the time. He's qualified for the playoffs 4 times in 6 years. 4 times in 5 years, and reached the MLS Cup final in 2015, which they lost to the Portland Timbers, and now this is where he's at here. He's got a decent managerial record, 92, 80, 67 overall. He's got a plus 15 goal differential in that time, and he is a noted player. He played for the United States men's national team numerous times. He was also his last appearance was with the United States in the 2006 World Cup as an unused substitute. So he's got some experience as a player at the World Cup and international level as well. Where he'll go from this point as a manager will be seen. I don't know what his recruitment style will be. I don't know how he'll fit in with the Tab Ramos aspect of the U20 program. There will be questions that shows how he interacts with these people. But again, if there's something about the U.S. Soccer Federation and those unanswered questions about the process, he may already have the in and be the right guy for that group, where Martinez and Osorio or a Vermes may not have fit in with the people that they've got in with the Soccer Federation right now. So that is a key factor moving forward. But do you have any last thoughts on Berhalter before we move on?
I mean, I think the team is going to be they're going to be very consistent. They're going to be very solid. And I just don't think they're going to wow us a lot. I think that's kind of been his style. It has been very, very consistent. You make 4 MLS playoffs in 5 years. That shows consistency. They did lose an MLS Cup to the Timbers. Shout out. But, yeah, it's consistency. And they're going to be very solid, I think. I just don't think they're going to be wowing us. So it'll be interesting to see how he does, especially with the Gold Cup coming up this summer, his first real test. And, consistency, calm. It'll be – there's some good players on the MLS, young guys, and he'll need to figure out how he can create a style that fits those guys, those Pulisic, Adams, those guys, and how can he get the best out of them. I think that's going to be his biggest question mark going into it. Does he have the ability to put them in the right position for them to succeed with the U.S. national team?
All right, that wraps up this initial hire. I'm pretty sure we'll be talking about this situation for weeks to come. But we're going to take a quick break. We've got the U17 Women's World Cup just wrapped up. Also, the field is set for the Women's World Cup this upcoming summer. We'll talk about what that means here on Your Soccer Passport, sponsored by Squadcast.fm.
What's up, everybody? This is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
And welcome back to Your Soccer Passport. We are on social media and would like to hear from you. Don't be afraid to interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Your Soccer Passport. So, Ivan, the Women's World Cup, the U17 version of it, has just wrapped up. Your champions are Spain, with a thrilling 2-1 victory over the Mexican side, which may be the bigger story of the U17 World Cup. All these games played in Uruguay, and Spain once again shows that they are starting to put up a really strong women's side in these youth tournaments. And that's one story of a growing program. But you also have the Mexican side from this final, a 2-1 in favor of Spain on December 1st. That Mexico kind of became the tournament darling in this place. They've always kind of been a Cinderella story in the women's side, and now they're starting to make some real significant waves in these youth tournaments.
Yeah, congratulations to Spain. You've said it. They're producing really quality youth teams, and your next hope is that over time that develops into the first team. And I mean, I'm so proud of the Mexican national, these girls, that they made it to the finals. I think a lot of us who support the Mexican national team are just so proud, and they earned this second place, and we were just so excited. Especially because the women's youth team doesn't really get the support it deserves, and for them to do it like that is fantastic. It shows kind of the investment the Mexican Federation has started to put into the women's game. Unfortunately, the senior team didn't make the World Cup, but you're seeing the steps of what happens when you make an investment into the women's game, into the youth game, and into trying to develop. And, you hope that they get the support they need moving forward as they go into U20 and as they become professionals. And, I mean, yeah, I'm overwhelmed with joy for the result for that. And I think more of it is what comes out of it in the future is what brings me joy, optimism, and hope for the women's game in Mexico. And, I think it just shows if you put the time and care into it, they're going to give you results.
I think that's the case with both squads, to be completely honest. I mean, and you're starting to see that with more teams across the world too, as equality starts to pop up a little bit more. Spain also was the runner-up in the U20 Women's World Cup last season, so there's a big factor with that as well in terms of developing teams as they move along. And you did hit the nail on the head. The Mexican national team did not make the Women's World Cup. Spain did, though. And they're going to be pulling in some of these players. There's even thoughts that they may pull one of the players from the U17 roster up in for a potential substitute role. So there are players from this team that you may see this upcoming summer. I thought that the games, just kind of tackling the World Cup as a whole, I thought these games were really close. Once you got to the knockout stage, the quarterfinals, 3 out of 4 games went to penalty kicks, with Canada beating Germany 1-0 in the other one. New Zealand and Canada made the semifinals, with New Zealand ending up defeating Canada 2-1 in the third place game as well. But there were some real weird ones earlier on in the tournament. Just with some of the teams that we'll be seeing in the World Cup, Cameroon, South Africa, the United States, blowouts one way or the other. You were getting 5-0, 4-0, 6-0 scores in some of these games. You were seeing multiple red cards. I don't think I've ever seen a World Cup at any level that's had as many red card issues as this one did. I think there were 8 games that dealt with red cards in this tournament. So it was a big one, and it kind of sets the stage a little bit. That's why you have these youth tournaments, because during the same time you were also wrapping up your final qualification tournament with New Zealand defeating Fiji on December 1st as well. They were the final team to make it into the Women's World Cup this summer for the Oceanic Zone. They will join other teams that we've talked about, but just running down through this initial group, out of the African zone, Cameroon, Nigeria, and South Africa. Cameroon won the third place game and got in. Nigeria and South Africa, I don't remember who won the title there. I believe it was Nigeria. In the Asian zone, you have Australia, China, Japan, Korea, and Thailand. That's South Korea, not North Korea. England, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Scotland, Spain, and Sweden from the European zone. France is your host. Italy is returning to the World Cup for the first time in a long time. Scotland, this is their first World Cup. Canada, Jamaica, and the U.S. make it out of the North American zone, with Argentina beating Panama in the playoff game. Argentina will join Brazil and Chile from South America. So these are the 24 teams that we have in the Women's World Cup this year. Most of them will make it to the knockout round. But it is interesting in that regard now to see who's where, what kind of setups you have. Is there any kind of dark horses or surprises throughout the qualification process that kind of shocked you in one way or the other?
I think it was Argentina and Chile making it from South America. That were the two things that struck me, and Jamaica as well. I think Jamaica making it were the surprising ones. I think, at the senior level, there's still a gap between the haves and have-nots of women's soccer. So I think it's going to be the favorites are still going to. I think the favorites are going to. There's still a huge gap with the U.S., with England, with France compared to these other teams, and I think you're probably going to see that when the World Cup rolls around. But it's great for the game It's great for the game in those countries, in Chile and Argentina, for them to have an experience, for the Jamaicans to have an experience at the World Cup. And I think Spain is the one that's going to be the most interesting, because we just talked about with their youth teams, they have invested in their women's pro league more with them and their association with the men's teams, with La Liga and everything. And you're seeing it now with the youth rankings and with the senior team. So I'd be interested to see if Spain can make a little surprise. But, I mean, those are my initial thoughts when you look at the list and you look at the teams.
Yeah, I think they're, coming out of South Africa, the South African team, they've really they had to grind out for it. When they first started their qualifications, I didn't think that they were going to be able to make it, but they actually kind of got some weird hop-alongs because of Equatorial Guinea being kind of in no man's land of qualifying for these qualifying tournaments, but still not being able to make it in because their soccer federation is barred by FIFA. So South Africa to kind of sneak in like that in that process, I thought was very interesting, even though that they had such a strong performance when they got to the final 8 teams in the African zone. Thailand is an interesting team because I think Thailand is kind of in that Argentina, Chile, Jamaica group. Asian teams have a real interesting aspect of making the World Cup, because you don't know which ones are the ones that have them or the ones that have not, because they seemingly don't have any depth, with the exception of China pre-2000 and Japan post-2000. Depth is kind of an issue for those teams, and so it'll be interesting to see how Korea and Thailand kind of move along, because at any given moment they can shock a lot of teams, maybe not everybody, but they're going to be a hard out and could be the team that forces a group of death to really be played out in an interesting way. So it is interesting to see how those will battle with each other when they start pulling teams into the different groups. Obviously, the World Cup will take note this between June and July of 2019. We'll have that kind of set up. The draw will be this Saturday at 6 p.m. local time in France. So it will be early in the morning on the East Coast and way early in the morning over on the West Coast for the United States fans that want to pay attention. So that will be upcoming. And again, just like everything else, I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot. We're going to take another quick break. Worldwide headlines are up next. And then after that, we're going to talk playoff time for MLS and Liga MX. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.
This is Rachel Mullins, host of Hashtag No Filter Friday, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my new show, Hashtag No Filter Friday, where we talk about all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around Hollywood. A new show drops every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Hashtag No Filter Friday. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Time now for Worldwide Headlines here on your Soccer Passport, a segment touching on some of the other big news from around the soccer world. Southampton has fired their manager Mark Hughes as the team drew with Manchester United. The former Stoke and Manchester City manager brought the team into the Premier League last season and signed a 3-year deal in May, but had just 5 wins in the team's last 27 games. Assistants Mark Bowen and Eddie Niedzwiecki also left. RB Leipzig's former manager Ralph Hasenhüttl is the favorite to take over the role. Drama continues from the Merseyside derby. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp has been charged with misconduct for celebrating in the center circle with his goaltender after Divock Origi's stoppage time winner against Everton. Merseyside police are also investigating items being thrown on the pitch at the end of the game. Nobody was injured in the alleged incident. And David Villa has a new home. The former NYCFC striker will be teaming up with his old Spanish national team Andres Iniesta with Japanese side Vissel Kobe. Today's Worldwide Headlines are brought to you by the Public House Media, celebrating their jump to new merchandise promoter TeePublic. The best way to promote your Soccer Passport and any other PHM shows is with t-shirts, mugs, wall art, and more, all available in the TeePublic shop. Visit teepublic.com/pubhousemedia. That's teepublic.com. Welcome back to your Soccer Passport. I am Brice Burge, Ivan Sanchez Carrasco 2. You can follow us on Twitter at Ivan Sanchez C90. I am at that Brice Burge, Brice with an I. Lots of commentary there. We do different stuff. We also have our show handle that's at Your Soccer Pass. We are working on making that Twitter a little bit better. So go ahead and interact with us on those formats. The MLS playoffs have come to a head with some dramatic games leading up to it. Atlanta and Portland are making the final. Both teams with some dramatic ways to get there. Probably nothing more dramatic than Portland, who won 3-2 in Kansas City to move along after a scoreless draw in Portland. The game winner coming from Diego Valeri at the 99th minute. What a crazy matchup this was. So entertaining. What did you, obviously you don't hide your Portland fandom. I hide mine a little bit better, but we're both Portland fans. So to see the Timbers make it to the playoffs or to make it to the finals like this, what does this mean to you?
Oh, man, that game was crazy. And, yeah, I'm not very subtle when it comes to my teams. And I'm okay with that. So, yeah, we're in the finals again. That game was fantastic because you had Kansas City who knew they needed a goal, and they knew they probably needed 2 goals to give themselves that extra cushion. And they went after it, and they really pushed Portland back really early on. And they got the goal they needed. And, I mean, the Blanco goal for the Timbers to tie it up was just an absolute stunner, and he got all of that, and you can just kind of feel the momentum changing after that, because before that, it didn't feel like the Timbers were creating anything. They weren't able to really break down the Kansas City defense at all. They weren't even really able to get near their goal at all. And, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about our sport. This sport is that a wonder goal like that, and the whole thing is just it's turned around on its head. And then after that, you just have Kansas City continuing to attack, and then Timbers finding these little gaps, finding these little areas to try to counter. And it was a spectacular game. Especially because the Timbers won. But yeah, it was fantastic. It was just great.
It is one heck of a game. I mean, just when you think about what Sporting KC was bringing into this year, Sporting Kansas City had not given up 3 goals at home all season. So for them to do that, Portland, that is, to go in there and score three, not only 3 goals like garbage goals, just put them back type things, get lucky, but actually show that grace and style to put those goals in the way that they did, was so emphatic that it was truly impressive to see. It gives them a lot more momentum to take down a team. You know, we had talked about it before, about how deep the Western Conference was compared to the Eastern Conference, and that, you know, there were so many teams fighting for that last playoff spot. There were so many teams that were up and down the just the rankings throughout different times in the year. I think Portland was 9th or 10th in the conference at one point this season. So they kind of rebounded a little bit after international play was over with the World Cup, and they got healthy, and they're getting on all cylinders all at the right time in a way that I think is going to give them a lot of confidence, which they'll need when they go into Atlanta, because Atlanta is hosting this final in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That's going to be absolutely rocking, especially after the way that Atlanta took care of business against New York.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta have been the best team all season for the most part, and they took care of New York. And I mean, if you're New York, it's frustrating, right? They've won 3 supporter shields, but they just have not been able to get it done in the playoffs. And they took and I mean, Atlanta was absolutely fantastic in the first leg, and it's a perfect matchup of the teams that are remaining that I think the MLS wanted. They definitely wanted that game to be in Atlanta. And I think they wanted the Timbers to be there too, just because of the support and the way the Timber fans are. You have the interesting story with Nagby, his former team, and his current team both meeting in the finals. You're going to get over 70 people at the finals. So if you're the MLS front office, you are very happy that these were, out of the teams that were remaining, that these were the results you got. And it's going to be a big task for the Timbers taking on Atlanta at home, because, you know, Atlanta does such a good job of implementing their style and finding weaknesses and finding what the other team doesn't do well for them to attack. And I think that's going to be the big thing. Atlanta, I think, is going to take the game to the Timbers. I think they're going to try to kind of and they kind of have to, because they're the team hosting, they're the ones first. And the Timbers are more comfortable kind of being defensive too, and kind of waiting for the gaps to happen and opening the gaps and attacking on the counter. So it sets up for fascinating finals and a really interesting matchup, I think.
I think you described it perfectly. When you are setting up that back and forth aspect, you know, I think that if this is just a run and gun type scenario, Atlanta wins this one hands down with what they've got up top. I think the difference is that now that you've got this momentum, and especially if Portland can get an early goal in the first 20 minutes or so, regardless of how many Atlanta scores in the first 20, if Portland can score as well to show that they can do this, you could see a high-scoring final going back and forth, because we know that Portland has the capability and the talent to go out and do it with Valeri and everybody else. They've got good setup. They've got good transition, and their passing was on point. I think they'll be able to do that when they're down in Atlanta as well. I don't think Atlanta's back line is prepared for this as much as other teams may have been defensively, but you've got some real opportunities now for Portland to spread out the field on the counterattack, take their moments, and create some real opportunities that is going to make this a very compelling matchup. I think Atlanta is still going to win it overall, but I think this is going to be one that probably has to go to extra time.
I'm taking the Timbers. I'm taking him. Let's go, Timbers. I'm taking them. I'm taking the Timbers over Atlanta.
Let me show you my shocked face that you picked Portland. What? Yeah. No. All right, let's jump down south. Mexican Liga MX, they're in the playoffs as well. First round done. 3 out of 4 teams remaining all come from Mexico City and Cruz Azul, America, and Pumas. Monterrey is the one team to disrupt that. It, again, is pretty much just straight chalk. Monterrey, the 5th seed, but Azul, America, and Pumas, your top 3 in the league. It creates some interesting matchups here and some compelling games because the first round was pretty good. I saw a couple of the matchups on Facebook. English language broadcasts on Facebook have been really good for following Liga MX this year. So as that has moved forward, we've now got the semifinal matchups. Which semifinal matchup is most compelling to you?
I think the Pumas America, because it's probably the third biggest rivalry in Mexican soccer, and you have a team in Pumas who I thought were going to lose to Tigres, to be honest with you, because I always like Tigres in a playoff situation, and for them to beat out Tigres, I think is really important. And you have America, who kind of have to take the game to Pumas and are going to be the ones who need to. I guess if it would be an upset, it would be Pumas over America, just because what's expected from America. They're expected to win every game. They're expected to win championships, and that's the compelling one. Just because it's a rivalry too, it's a city rivalry. The Cruz Azul Monterrey matchup is fascinating because Monterrey are so consistent and and the last 10 years they've been probably one of the 3 most consistent teams in Liga MX. And on the other side, you have Cruz Azul, who have just been dying for a championship. They haven't won one in 20 years. And, this is a team that holds themselves to the same levels of Pumas, of America. And they've kind of had this jinx on them. And they rolled through the Liga MX, getting the top seed. But now they kind of need to do it in the playoffs. And I think, are they going to wilt? I guess is a big question. And that's the fascinating aspect from that matchup is will Cruz Azul wilt in their pursuit of that title that they really, really want? And can they get by a Monterrey team who is just so consistent, so good every year?
And that's the thing, when you were looking at the matchup previously, Azul won both of them 2-1, 2-0. The problem with that, though, is that the first matchup, the 2-1 matchup, required a red card. It was part of Cruz Azul's, I think it was 5 out of 6 games where one team or another got a player set off, and when you include the Copa MX quarterfinal. So, even the semifinal against Leon, both of those games had red cards in them where players were sent off. So it is frustrating in that regard because now you're not really going to know a team that's so consistent in Monterrey whether or not they'll be able to kind of get that spark, get them going, especially right off the bat when you're trying to steal a game or steal a couple points on the road. But I mean, Azul is kind of like a Red Bulls type scenario. They have to prove that they can do it, and Monterrey wanting to get up there and disrupt that all-Mexican city final is something that I think they're aware of, and it will play off. I think Monterrey may be able to pull off the upset here, but that just might be my fandom of anarchy and entropy in dealing with brackets and tournaments. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, obviously those games will be coming up. The first leg of those finals will be Wednesday. Second will be Saturday. So we'll be able to talk about the finals next week in that matchup as well. So we'll talk about that next week. This will do it for the show this week, though. We did a different style format. We'll see how it goes. We'll listen to the tape. We'll sit down with Coach and see what he thinks about it, and try to move along and let us know how you think of it. You're welcome to listen to any of our past shows on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, and wherever your favorite podcasts are found. So go ahead and give us a listen and tell us what you think about the show format switch up, and if you like it. Until next time, Ivan, what's your shout out?
Timbers! That's my shout out. Go Timbers.
Okay. No, I also like that Kesha song. So.
Yeah. Oh, and with Pitbull. Don't forget.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, everything is featuring Pitbull. So
That's right.
all right,
That's
so
right. Go.
so my shout out is to Pitbull. All right, you've been listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.